Everyone seems to agree on one thing. 23-year-old Paul Burdach is a really great guy. He has a large circle of friends, among whom he is very popular, and a close bond with his mother. He also gets along very well with his sister. Perhaps, paradoxically, that is exactly why hardly anyone believes he would just disappear like that. He seems more like a young man who is perfectly capable of deciding for himself what he wants to do and when. Yet Paul's mother had a very different fear immediately after his disappearance in April 2024. And the police now also assume that Paul Burdach has fallen victim to a crime. To this day, however, no one knows what happened to the young man, nor do they know who is responsible. Paul Burdach lives in Rathenow, about an hour's drive from Berlin. From 2017 to 2020, Paul completed an apprenticeship as a metal worker. However, he has recently been looking for a job. His mother gives him some money every now and then and supports him in other ways as best she can. The two have a close relationship. The 23-year-old and his mother are in daily contact, including on April 16th. They agree that Sabina will stop by Paul's place the next day. She wants to bring him a serving of his favorite meal. Paul is happy about it, but apparently has other plans for this April 16th. And this brings us straight to one of the most mysterious aspects of today's case. On this day, he plans to pick up a pallet jack from a hardware store that Paul's best friend ordered for him. The pallet jack is bulky and heavy, but Paul's friend doesn't have time to help him pick it up. Paul himself doesn't have a driver's license, so he urgently needs some last-minute help with the transport. And he finds it. Someone drives with Paul to the hardware store and helps him pick up the package. We know this because an employee helps the two men load it into the car. To this day, we don't know who the man was who helped Paul or what kind of car they were driving. The only thing that's clear is that Paul and the unknown helper bring the package to his apartment, and the stranger eventually says goodbye. The next day, April 17th, Paul's mother stops by her son's place in the morning and brings him a bowl of his favorite soup. She does this often, since she passes by her son's place on her way to work anyway. At 8:15 a.m., Paul is still in bed. That's why the two don't speak to each other. Sabina has a key to the apartment. She just pops in briefly to drop off the food. Then she has to be on her way. Later, Paul sends a thank you message via WhatsApp. The rest of the day can only be pieced together based on chat logs. At 2:09 p.m., Paul messages a friend. In a message, he says his TV is broken and asks if his friend knows anyone who might be looking to get rid of one. He sends Paul a photo of a somewhat outdated set, to which Paul politely declines. At 3:30 p.m., Paul's mother calls his cell phone, but he doesn't answer the call. It's certainly possible that he just couldn't answer at that moment. In fact, Paul actually has plans that day. He's supposed to meet up with a friend at 5 p.m. However, he cancels the meeting via WhatsApp. That evening, Sabina sends Paul another message, but it doesn't go through. So the next morning, she sends a few more messages. 7:15 a.m. Paul, please get in touch. I'm really worried. At 7:40 a.m. I'm at work all day today. Please get in touch. But even when Sabine checks her phone again after work, the messages still haven't been delivered. She knows that at that time, Paul could only be online via a Wi-Fi network. This means Paul hasn't come home since the night before. So Sabine drives back to Paul's apartment. As she feared, however, there's no sign of her son there. The food she brought him the day before hasn't been touched. Paul's cat, Cynthia, is there, but apparently hasn't been fed. In any case, it actually looks to Sabine as though Paul had only intended to leave his apartment for a short while. The food is ready, and notes with upcoming errands are lying around. The last person likely to have seen Paul is a neighbor. She says she saw him around noon on April 17th. After that, the young man's trail goes cold. So, on April 18th, Sabine goes to the police to file a missing person report. According to her own account, however, they brush her off. Every adult has the right to freely determine their own whereabouts, and if there are no concrete reasons or signs that a person is in a helpless situation, then from a purely legal standpoint, there is no reason for the police to launch an investigation. And that is exactly how the police initially classify the Paul Burdach case. So Paul's mother takes matters into her own hands in the days that follow. She calls hospitals, puts up missing person posters, distributes Paul's photo, and also inquires at police stations in nearby towns. It takes a few weeks before the Criminal Investigation Department is finally called in. Following initial inquiries, they launch an investigation against an unknown suspect on suspicion of manslaughter. For Paul's family, however, this step comes too late. According to the family, the surveillance footage from the hardware store could no longer be viewed. As a result, the identity of the unknown helper remains unknown to this day. Paul does not come home for his 24th birthday on May 10, 2024 either. Paul is unable to receive the gift his mother bought for him. Instead, she desperately searches for answers. Paul's cat comes home with her to Sabine's place. Nevertheless, she tries to keep Paul's apartment, even though that is difficult in every way. Because more and more time is passing, and Paul remains missing. Exactly what led the police to conclude that a crime had been committed is only known in fragments. However, the police note that Paul owns not just one cell phone, but several. The reason for this remains unclear to this day. Of course, this invites speculation, the kind you're probably already thinking of. We'll get into that in more detail in a moment. It wasn't until December 2024 that the police released photos of Paul to the public in an effort to locate him. By that point, the young man had already been missing without a trace for 8 months. Along with the photos, the police announced that the Homicide Division had now taken over the investigation. Above all, the police are asking potential witnesses the following questions as part of the search. 1. Who has seen the missing Paul Burdach in person since Wednesday, April 17, 2024? 2. Who can provide information regarding the circumstances of his disappearance or his current whereabouts? 3. Who saw Paul Burdach on Tuesday, April 16, 2024, in or near the hardware store in Rathenow, or can provide details about his male companion or their vehicle? One question the police aren't asking, but I certainly am. Why did Paul even need the pallet jack? As far as we know, he didn't have a home workshop, a garage, or a garden. A bulky piece of equipment like that is really only useful if you want to regularly transport truly heavy items. It isn't until January 2025 that the police launch a large-scale search operation. After that, there's a bit of movement. According to the police, new tips from the public come in during the search efforts. The police secure several items found in a nearby wooded area. Unfortunately, it was not disclosed what these items were or what the subsequent investigations revealed. In March, there was another operation in which divers and cadaver dogs searched the Havel River for Paul. The search radius was expanded to about a 30-minute radius around Rathenow. However, according to a spokeswoman, it was not until 11 months later that the police reportedly received tips that led to a search operation in this area. In April 2025, 1 year after his disappearance, the Paul Burdach case is broadcast on television. However, it is not known whether any significant tips came in after the broadcast. Paul's mother openly criticizes the police's work in the media. She reports that prior to January 2025, Neither dogs, nor drones, nor helicopters were deployed to track Paul down. When your own child goes missing, you'd probably want to turn over every single stone yourself. But since that's simply not possible, you have to rely on the investigators' help. On top of that, there are also her public appearances and interviews with the media, which likely take a great deal of energy, especially since concerns about the police's handling of the case have plagued her from the very beginning. According to Sabine, Paul's apartment wasn't even searched, nor were any fingerprints taken from the hardware store package found in his apartment. Contrary to this, a newspaper article states that the police seized a large amount of cash and conspicuously expensive accessories from Paul's possessions. The police themselves have not commented on these points. The family has offered a reward of €2,000 for information. The authorities have offered none. In addition, shortly after his disappearance, the family took the initiative to hire a private investigator who was out in Rathenow with a search dog team. The dogs apparently picked up a scent of Paul, but it led to a dead end at a road. Sabine is also disappointed by the TV report. According to the mother, the police didn't reveal much in the film. In fact, the segments for the program are always produced in close consultation with the investigative authorities. However, the police can and must withhold certain information for tactical reasons. In the film, the focus is on the fact that Paul is often gone for an indefinite period of time. The clip shows that Paul reportedly said he sometimes just had to get out. There are also scenes where he answers calls in which he is apparently given instructions or something similar. Unfortunately, and Paul's mother is absolutely right about this, the segment is kept rather superficial. The authorities certainly have good reasons for this, but somehow, it all makes things a bit more mysterious than they already are. Unfortunately, as mentioned, the police now believe this was a homicide. They also consider it possible that the incident is linked to drug dealing. There is actually nothing to suggest that Paul might have taken his own life. He had his beloved cat, a great relationship with his mom, and many good friends who speak very highly of the then 23-year-old. On the TV show, the lead investigator says there are now several indications that Paul was the victim of a violent crime. This may be linked to findings from investigations into other drug offenses in the region. Sabine also says in an interview that there is a large drug scene in Rathenow. Accordingly, it is possible that her son got involved in it unnoticed by those closest to him. That would explain the cash and the expensive accessories, even though Paul hadn't had a job recently, and presumably the pallet jack as well. And then there's another thing. There were apparently one or more bags of dog food in Paul's apartment. Without wanting to give anyone any ideas here, it's apparently the case that dog food packages are often used to smuggle drugs. This method is intended to make detection by X-ray screening or sniffer dogs more difficult. According to investigators, Paul has contacts that even his close friends and family were unaware of. Any information from these contacts would be extremely valuable. One of these contacts could very well be the unknown person who was with Paul at the hardware store on April 16th. Someone was there with Paul, and that person could be an important witness. Even if someone knows who that person was and can provide a tip about him or his car, that would certainly be a big help to the investigation. Unfortunately, based on current information, there are still no leads on this. Nor is there any information on where Paul was after noon on April 17, 2024. Paul is 1.86 meters tall, has a slim, athletic build, and blonde hair, most recently cut short. He has a distinctive mole on the back of his head. He was last seen wearing a green Ralph Lauren sweatshirt and blue jeans. In addition, a few other items have been missing since Paul's disappearance, which he likely wore most recently as well. These include a black Louis Vuitton shoulder bag and a silver Tag Heuer watch with a green dial. His key case and wallet are also missing, along with documents such as his ID card or health insurance card. The day Paul went missing in May 2024 was a market day, and Paul lived in a very central part of town, so there were naturally a lot of people out and about. it's quite possible that someone saw or heard something that Wednesday. With something like this, it's really never too late to contact the police. I don't think anyone would hold it against you for coming forward now. Any clue, no matter how small, could be a huge help. And if you watch one of the interviews with Paul's mom, you can see how much she's suffering. She is truly doing everything she can to find Paul. Sabine also told a newspaper that she is in contact with the family of another missing man. There has been no trace of Sven from Rathenow since March 15, 2024. The 47-year-old disappeared about a month before Paul in a town only about 30 minutes away. In Sven's case, authorities also suspect a homicide. Why this is the case is unknown. Sabine tells the newspaper that it is strange that two men from the region have disappeared without a trace within such a short time, even though not much usually happens in the area. The police themselves have stated that there are currently no indications of a connection between the two incidents. The TV program also did not mention Sven's case in connection with the other. Sven's sister-in-law also said in another interview that the quick succession of the two missing persons cases struck her as odd. However, she does not believe there is a connection. After all, there is a significant age difference between Paul and Sven. On top of that, Sven has few ties to Rathenow, where Paul lives. So maybe it really is just a coincidence. Even if we don't know much, the theory the police have floated regarding drug deals unfortunately sounds quite plausible. But that also means someone must know what happened to Paul. Recently, there have been repeated reports in the news of drug rings being busted in the wider area around Paul's home. That his disappearance has anything to do with this is still just speculation. But if it does, the police might be closer to a hot lead than we can imagine. Perhaps there are even one or more people who know something, maybe even someone who wasn't directly involved. And that's exactly when it would be so valuable to ease their conscience, both for a potential witness themselves, as well as for the investigators, and most of all, for Paul's loved ones, who still miss him terribly to this day. At this point, I'd like to once again wish Paul's family and friends, especially his mother, much strength. I have immense respect for how she's fighting to finally get some answers. I hope this case is solved as soon as possible. Please feel free to share the video or leave a like or a comment. This will help boost the video's visibility in the algorithm and get it recommended to more people. Especially with current missing persons cases, it's all the more important that lots of people see the videos. Other than that, there isn't much else to say. I hope you're having a good morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time you're watching this, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, bye everyone.